Hey guys, welcome back to another barbecue talk. On today's video, we will be talking about tuning plates. So this is another question that I get quite a bit, especially since I cook a bunch on my backyard pit, and I think a couple people have Yoders or other designs that are similar to it. I think Horizon is one that's really similar to Yoder as well. I don't know if the Old Country has a tuning plate, but I get a bunch of questions on this. So the latest question comes from Gary Hairston. He says, "Can you explain the use of tuning plates, their purpose? I've been following you for about a week, like what you're saying." All right, Gary, thank you so much for your question. And again, Gary is not the first person who has asked this question. He probably won't be the last, but I've responded to a couple people, but I figured, well, enough people have asked me, so I'm going to make a video on that right now. Again, a lot of this conversation is like I say, my bro science of barbecue. But this is just kind of my thoughts on tuning plates, what it's used for, why I don't personally use it, and also other designs that might be similar to tuning plates that might be kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say it's the same design or same thing, but I also want to talk about other pits that might have something similar to that. So first off, kind of the purpose of tuning plates. If you guys don't know what a tuning plate is, it's basically a sheet of metal that runs from where the firebox is, and then going to the other side of the cooking chamber. And as it goes, they'll have the front side closest to the firebox will just be there'll be no holes. And as you go further and further away, there will gradually be larger holes punched into this sheet metal. I say in hopes that it'll kind of even out the temperature from end to end of the pit. Even though that is the purpose of the tuning plate, in my opinion, maybe I've just been doing it wrong my entire life. But in my opinion, it doesn't really work like that. One thing that I don't like about that tuning plate is that because it is closing off that side that's closest to your firebox and it's just like sheet metal with no holes, you don't really get that airflow that you should in an offset pit because you're not really getting any air until the holes show up towards the end, and it doesn't really flow right. So the temp gauges are a little bit off, and it tells a different story. Like it, I don't know what else to say. Like the temps just aren't right. The main reason why I don't like the tuning plate is it gives a false hope to those people who want to use entire cooking surface, and they try to squeeze in, briskets or whatever closest to the firebox because, well, they're like, well, there's no flames coming through because it's being blocked off by that sheet metal, and so it should be okay. But it doesn't really work like that either because you're still getting a bunch of heat still in that front part, and your stuff was still burnt. The other reason why I don't like it, and it's probably my biggest reason for not using it, is because that sheet metal for the tuning plate, it's pretty thick. Like the one that I pulled out of my Yoder is really, really heavy, and so it retains so much heat. So all that stuff that, like I said, the stuff that's like closer to the front, that you would assume that it would be safe because there's no like flames hitting the meat or whatever thing that you're cooking on there. You would assume that's safe, but that the bottom of my briskets or whatever would usually get a little bit crusty, and it's kind of like when you go to slice your brisket and everything's fine up top and you get to the bottom and you hear like a crunch because the bottom of it is just like scorched. And I think that has a lot to do with that tuning plate just holding in so much heat, and even if like the fire dies a little bit, or if it's like a 250 fire, that plate is still way hotter than 250 because it's holding so much heat. So those are my main reasons that I don't like it. It doesn't really allow your your offset, to flow properly because all the air is coming from the back through the holes and then maybe coming up front, but I don't really see that happening because it's not necessarily like a reverse flow smoker. When you're cooking in an offset, the best thing about cooking on an offset is that you do get this draw, right? Going from the firebox, going through, swirling around a little bit, and going up the stack. Now, if you have this metal sheet that's in front, you kind of don't allow it to flow naturally, and you force it down underneath through these holes that are up here. And I'm sure some of it kind of comes back, but it's not really flowing like it should. Third reason why I don't use it is just for sake of cleaning and convenience. That thing is really, really heavy. To kind of fit it back into the smoker and pull it out and scrape it down, all that kind of stuff is really annoying. And so I don't use it. I think we put it on like just on the ground by our shed out there so that we can wheel things in because it is a very sturdy piece of metal. But yeah, I didn't think for a second after I pulled it out that I should put it back in. In my opinion, it's one of those barbecue kind of gadget things that have one specific purpose, but it's not really good for that purpose. Like after a while, you realize like it's a cool looking design, but it doesn't really help the cook at all. And I'm not trying to shoot down just Yoder because I know there are other, pit designs that have that in there too. But personally, I just don't think that a backyard pit needs to have a tuning plate that runs all the way through because you don't have that much space for airflow. So you want to maximize that airflow as much as possible. So the other thing that I wanted to make clear too is that a tuning plate is different than a reverse flow smoker. So a reverse flow smoker, I think the one that's most popular is probably a Lang, and those smoker designs are where you have the firebox on one side and there's a plate with no holes. Well, maybe some of them have holes. I'm not sure. I've never cooked on one. But a sheet that goes all the way across underneath the grate. The smokestack is on the same side or on top of the firebox. So the way that it flows, it'll go underneath the plate and it'll go over where the meat is and then it'll go up the stack. And I think in hopes that you would get more smoke on your barbecue. I'm not really sure. I never really fully understood what the purpose of reverse flow was, but that's just my assumption. The only reverse flow that I've seen be really good and be really efficient and maximize the cooking space because that tuning plate actually didn't really affect the front. Like you actually could use all the way from front to back was Evie Mays. A lot of the other Langs that I've seen or food that I've seen other people produce from Langs, because if they're just going by temperature in terms of their cooks, like I always say, 250 is not always 250 on every single pit. So am I saying that if you have a tuning plate and you make good barbecue that you should rip it out? No. I mean, if you figure it out and you like the way your stuff is coming out, leave it in there. Why change anything? But if you find that your briskets or whatever food that you're getting, the bottom is starting to get a little bit too charred, or maybe the airflow in your smoker isn't as you guys know me. I cook with a slightly dirtier fire, but if you notice that's a little bit dirtier than it should be based off of how your fire looks in the firebox, but when you see the smokestack, it's kind of a little bit too smoky. Maybe the tuning plate might be getting in the way of the airflow. Don't think that just because you have that tuning plate in there, that means you'll have the cooking space from end to end where everything is going to cook the same, because it's not. So hopefully that answers some of your questions about the tuning plate. It's something that I always wanted to talk about, but I wanted to make sure enough people were interested in the topic. So if you guys have any more questions about that, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this video with your friends. I'll see you guys in the next one.